This is WCCO, Minneapolis, St. Paul at 830. It's exactly 11 o'clock in the Central Zone.
CBS News. 35 years of fighting in Vietnam are now ended. The president of South Vietnam has unconditionally surrendered to the Viet Cong. I'm Stuart Novins, reporting on the CBS radio network. It was a brief radio address by President Duong Van Minh. It was directed more to the Viet Cong leaders than to the South Vietnamese people. UPI correspondent Alan Dawson filed this report a short while ago over one of the few remaining communications links.
The government of South Vietnam has surrendered to the Viet Cong. In his radio address to the nation, President Duong Van Minh told soldiers to lay down their arms and stop fighting. He called on the Provisional Revolutionary Government to enter into discussions for what he called the turnover ceremony for the administration, both civilian and military. Fighting could be heard around the edges of Saigon as he spoke, and after he spoke, the immediate effect of his announcement was not known. Alan Dawson, Saigon.
As newsman Dawson reported, General Minh offered to meet with representatives of the Provisional Government, the political arm of the Viet Cong, not to negotiate peace, but merely to work out details of the actual transfer of power in a kind of ceremony that would be a substitute for further bloodshed. There are new questions now to be answered. What response will come from the VC? What will those South Vietnamese troops do who are still armed? Will they indeed lay down their arms as General Minh directed in his speech tonight? President Minh's speech was followed by an appeal from the Deputy Chief of Staff to the South Vietnamese military also to remain calm and put down their arms. There is no sign yet of where or when the Saigon government and the Viet Cong will make contact. In Washington, there is no comment, no confirmation of what has happened. One high official said he learned about the surrender from a reporter. There is no longer, of course, an American embassy in Saigon. More news after this.
It is night in Ho Chi Minh City, South Vietnam. The name changed from Saigon after the South Vietnamese surrendered today to the North Vietnamese. The Viet Cong has control of the government radio station. They raised the flag over the presidential palace and now occupy all strategic points of the city. Many South Vietnamese troops have turned in their weapons and have melded into the city population. A curfew is underway in the city, and all government employees have been ordered to return to work. Students and other young people told to take part in a demonstration at some later date. On the day of the surrender, more South Vietnamese pilots flew their planes to Thailand, bringing other government officials and families. About the only Americans left in Vietnam now are reporters. The AP's two Pulitzer Prize winners, Peter Arnett and Daniel DeLuce. The CBS News nightman in Saigon, Eric Caballero, also sticking around. He's a British schoolteacher who wrote a message recently on a blackboard for his frightened students. "This is my home. I am not leaving," it said. This is Jurgen Nash with the news. And this is WCCO, Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Chris Clausen here, bringing you back the gems from the past on Gold 104, KFMX St. Louis Park.
NBC Radio News, the fall of Saigon. This is Don Doak. Our reporter in Saigon, Jim Laurie, says the word the world has expected has come. The South Vietnamese government has given up.
In a mid-morning radio broadcast, the acting president of South Vietnam, General Duong Van Minh, announced an unconditional surrender to Viet Cong forces around the city of Saigon. General Minh said, "We are here to hand over the power to you in order to avoid bloodshed." He called on Saigon forces to lay down their arms and remain in place. It was an unconditional surrender and a unilateral ceasefire. Now Saigon is awaiting a reply from the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong forces. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese have for days now maintained their positions all around the city, but have not pushed through. Immediately following the announcement, there seemed to be a new mood in Saigon as artillery in the distance seemed to subside and there was very little gunfire 30 minutes after the announcement. Jim Laurie, NBC News, Saigon.
NBC News has contacted the Pentagon and the State Department. Neither will comment on the apparent end of the war in South Vietnam. More news after this. At a news conference in Washington, Secretary Kissinger joined President Ford in calling for no recriminations over the U.S. role in South Vietnam, and then Kissinger sized up the 3 decades of fighting in Vietnam.
It is clear that the war did not achieve the objectives of those who started the original involvement, nor the objectives of those who sought to end that involvement, which they found on terms which seemed to them compatible with the sacrifices that had been made.
On Capitol Hill, there's hindsight viewing on Vietnam, such as this from Senator Harry Byrd, independent of Virginia.
The United States made a fundamental error, 2 fundamental errors for that matter. One was becoming involved in a ground war in Southeast Asia, and the second fundamental error was the way that President Johnson and Secretary McNamara determined to fight that war.
Senator Harry Byrd of Virginia. You're listening to NBC News.